Welcome to Behind the Frame, a podcast where I interview artists to understand more about their creative process and the art industry itself. Today's guest is the young and talented Alex Ghani. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
How did you get this piece in today? I know you had to travel with it.
It was rolled up and tied up with string, and it was hot today, so it was a bit of a struggle, but we got it here, and it's not too cracked and broken, so that's good.
You said earlier on when I was talking to you that the cracking is actually what you want to create through this piece.
Yeah, the cracking is sort of it's supposed to create that. It's supposed to sort of show the calmness underneath the hectic and chaotic world which this painting sort of creates and supposed to make you feel.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, the cracking is quite a mundane brown color, which does show the calmness of all the hectic reds and yellows and oranges sort of competing with each other.
And so,
Which,
what was your inspiration to start making this piece and think about the cracks and the layering you wanted to put into it?
um, so I can sort of dive into how I develop the ideas of my
Go for it.
paintings, which sort of rely on two foundational rules I have when I'm sort of starting my pieces. Um, so I tend to have either an issue or something I love or a feeling um, which creates a certain emotion, and I tend to sort of create a balance between those two.
Mm.
And depending on how I feel about it, I put more balance. So this one, um, the foundational idea is sort of anxiety and um, sort of losing control and the hecticness of life and sort of that world. And obviously the feeling of that is sort of anxious and angry and so the colors are quite demonstrate that quite well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. When I first noticed was the reds and the really deep colors, I felt, anger was the emotion that I evoked for me
Yeah.
personally.
And with that, I sort of focused more on the emotional side rather than the issue at hand,
Mm.
which is, say, what causes the anxiety. So some of my pieces, I have the anxiety feeling, and then I'll focus more on what causes that. So if it's communication with people, or if it's a political issue, then you'll focus more. But this one is trying to emphasize the emotion rather than the reason, if that makes sense.
Do you find it cathartic when you're feeling these feelings and you think I'm gonna turn it into a piece? Is it? Do you find it cathartic?
I find art is the best medium for me to express how I feel. And it's sometimes awkward or difficult to speak long sentences or you write about
Mm.
how you feel. But with a piece, hopefully, if you do it well, that feeling is transposed to the viewer instantaneously. And that's why I sort of think is the best sort of form of artwork and create.
You've touched on, viewers, what you want them to take away from your work. And I was thinking, when I go to galleries, I often take photos and then send it to, like, for you, for example, friends and family, and show them the pieces I've seen, my favorite pieces. Do you think
Yeah.
that, like, through these photos, people are no longer getting the connection you want them to have compared to when you see the pieces in person?
I think it's hard. I think artists are always trying to adapt to sort of modern circumstances. When before we mentioned about me bringing pieces, and I complained about how big my pieces were and how annoying it is to transport. Um, and this is sort of some of my few pieces which I can bring easily without having to bring a big van here.
Mm.
Um, for me, text is really important with my pieces, and taking a photo of something depends on the quality of the photo, but I feel it is harder to get that emotion through. With sculptures, again, depending on where you're viewing the sculpture, you get a different feel of the painting. But I mean, that's the same as a viewer. So I do think there is an element of it's better to see it in person, but I also think that we have to adapt to the modern ways of people viewing paintings and sculptures and all forms of artwork.
Because this is the first time I've seen this one in person. And
Yeah,
I remember when you unraveled it, I was like, wow, like, this definitely is not different, but I definitely felt different when I saw it because so much more detail that I hadn't previously noticed. Like, I didn't realize there was all the wax layering on top, and it's pretty cool that you put that through. But you've spoken about how, like, transporting your huge pieces. And I remember being at yours a few weeks ago, and I saw that, like, every piece there was like 7 foot by 5 foot. Is there a
yeah,
reason behind this?
they're all pretty massive. I like being quite hands-on with my pieces, and I can be a bit more erratic and emotional with my pieces when they're larger. Um, there's also more room for mistake, um, which I think is quite important because all my paintings have lots and lots of layers, and most of them have 10 plus layers of paint on them or other stuff on them. This has wax, charcoal, chalk, many forms of acrylic and oils, so it takes forever to dry as well. But for me, scale is very important. I also like working with my hands with the paint. I pour paint and I pour clay slip, which is a mixture of thin clay to create cracks, and you can't really do that on a small scale. And with canvases, they can also feel quite constraint for me. So for this one's off the canvas, I first actually was painting this on canvas. Um, but the hectic feel I was trying to create felt confined and too calm in a rectangular sort of shape, which was bound and tight.
Mm.
So I sort of took it off the canvas and I felt a little bit more free to create it, especially when it's big. You can make mistakes and have more layers, and lots of times the mistakes end up not being good. And then when I scrape away at the paints, you see those mistakes under, but I quite like looking at the
Yeah, it's
paints.
cool because your early work, you started off with like pencil and a lot of fine line, and then you
Yeah,
went into more, quite big canvases. But you've also started to venture into sculpture and pottery.
yeah. I uh I loved the fine art side, the more precise work, and so did my parents, and so did most people like having sort of more fine work on their walls. Um, but I just didn't feel like I could express what I wanted to express. I didn't feel like it was the outlet which I wanted it to be. Um, and that's sort of again a reason why I wanted to go big, is because I felt like there's classic people always get bigger is better, but for me, just bigger is just like easier for me to put what's in my heart on the canvas. Um, and sculpture is another form of expression which I found um, really enjoyable, and almost a new medium for me to express my ways in different way, my feelings in different ways. I just, yeah, I want to keep exploring different mediums, whether it's film or more more graphics works or even animation. I think I need to keep exploring to find my voice, and so far, combining painting and sculpture sort of is what my sort of feel is right now. That's my style right now.
In like time of how long it takes you to make a piece, what's
Mm.
the comparison between, for example, this one and then a sculpture, for example? Like which one would take longer?
Um, it depends. So I spent a year working on, well, half a year working on a metal sculpture, purely because it takes a long time to make things the way I wanted it to, because I was learning a new skill whilst doing it. But with paints, I've been painting for like 10 plus years, so I know how to work with paint a little bit more. So they tend to be faster. But also with these sorts of paintings I do, they take a long time to dry. So they vary depending on the medium I'm using, even when I'm painting. Some of my paintings took like 3 months to dry, even though I was done with the process in around 3 days of like 7 hour hour like
It's
work.
interesting that you said it took like half a year because for me, I want to change, my career every 2 days.
Yeah.
Do you ever like find that you're working on a piece and all of a sudden you think the inspiration that you had just isn't really giving what you wanted it to give anymore and you want to change it up a little bit? And like, how do you deal with that transition?
I tend to sort of surround my workplace with the inspiration I have, and the inspiration does continuously change, but the motivation behind the piece doesn't. So where I would have this piece, the whole walls around us would be paintings of either inspiration of nature I found, or things I want to remember the feeling of, um, as well as artists I like. So lots of the inspiration I took with this piece was an artist called Oscar Murillo, who I think is a fantastic artist. And I would love lots of his paintings around my study, and music as well. For me, it's really important in my work. There's a couple of good pieces by an artist called Have a Nice Life, and some of his pieces really cause that anxiety in like feeling that build up of it, like almost like you can explode. And I would listen to that sometimes whilst I was working, and you sort of got to relive that motivation. But it does change, and it's important to sort of track that change, and you'll see the change in the fitting, especially if they take a long time. as well as sculpture. But for sculpture, sometimes you have to plan it a little bit more when you're building it. My pieces were a bit more uh, like skeletal
Mm.
pieces, so you can't really change so much apart from the faces and sort of what you're doing. But the body sort of changes, stays the same. So it depends on the type of piece, depends on how much room you have to move.
Yeah. Well, I remember when we were growing up, you were always like the most sporty one in the family. You were like first team rugby, and I at one point thought like you're going to go into sports professionally. And then there was this kind of transition in your early teenage years where you kind of started looking into art a bit more. How did you find making that transition at like an all boys school? And was the environment encouraging?
Um, the school I was at was a brilliant school, and they had the equipment to help me sort of transition to that and support me. There's always a stigma with going into the art world, especially when you go to an all boys school like I did, where your trajectory is almost written in the stone, where you're going to either go into finance or a lawyer or doctor or that type of world. Um, but I always sort of did art for fun, and I felt like I needed to do it as like an outlet. Um, and the change from rugby, it meant friendships sort of died because art's quite a solitary thing to do. Um, but I was okay. That was for me. It was a sacrifice, and it was worth it. And
Mm,
I enjoyed it. And I feel like if I needed to have like a scream, I could do it in paint form. But yeah, for
yeah.
me, the school supported me, and my parents are very supportive
Yeah.
of what I was doing. Um, and yeah, that's where it took me to UAL, and I loved every moment there.
There's a lot of uncertainty in the creative industries, and like there's not always a guarantee of jobs, not always a guarantee of money to be made. So I can
Yeah,
imagine there was some worries early on about this transition
there
happening.
still are worries with this happening.
How do
Um,
you find like when you're working on a piece like this? I can imagine like costs a lot of money to get space to work in and get all the materials. How do you focus on like being able to fund these projects?
um, well, I work part time. I work in a pub and I work during that to make money. And I'm still doing another degree right now in politics. Um, so I'm sort of in between doing both right now, balancing both academic work and artwork. I'm also practicing writing novels to find more outlets and keep up that creativity going. Um, but yeah, it's a struggle, is the answer.
Mm.
I think for most artists, it's a struggle to do that. Paints cost a lot of money. If you're doing bigger canvases, it's going to cost more money. But yeah, part-time jobs is the way to go.
Do you ever feel like though, because you're spending so much time working, you don't have enough time to dedicate to what you actually want to do?
Yeah, I do. And for that, as I was saying, I try to use different outlets which are less costly, like
Mm.
writing. I can feel like I can channel not to the extent of with art and sculpture or
Yeah,
painting and sculpture, but to a certain extent I can. I think you just have to keep it up. If that's pottery lessons and little group sessions or little sketches. I think you just got to keep up that creative spirit, and
yeah.
then you'll find go back into it.
No, fair enough. I
That's
mean, I know whenever I'm feeling creative, I feel like I get a bit of tunnel vision sometimes,
yeah,
and I want to only focus on that and forget that I actually have other
yeah,
responsibilities to deal with. And I was wondering what you thought about, you know, when I'm scrolling through social media and I come across AI images, it's like
yeah.
they're getting so incredibly
They
realistic at the
are,
moment. It's insane.
especially that VO3,
Oh, I can't. This animals are dancing now and like
and Yetis are doing
talking and
talking
vlogging.
and doing outdoor boy channel video.
Wonder how you find like because AI art could be seen it may take over the industry. Do you think? Is there a way to kind of battle this and make your work stand out?
I don't think you can really take away. You can really take the human out of art. Um, I think what they're doing is amazing, and I think it can be quite commercialized. But I think it does take people's jobs, and I don't think there is that human aspect to it yet.
Mm.
Um, you can always sort of tell, oh, it doesn't look quite real. Um,
can't tell.
You know, tell.
Can't tell. I look at some of them and I'm like, wow, like who's this artist? And it's just AI generated.
I think humans will always sort of dominate the sphere of art just because of how human art is, and it's all for me at least. Art is so emotional, and I don't really think you can really program the real human emotion into AI, at
So
least not yet.
you say emotional.
Yeah,
So Sotheby's recently auctioned off a banana taped to a frame for about $6.2 million.
yeah,
I mean, personally, I always thought the idea that if I just taped an avocado to a frame and maybe I could make similar amount of money. But
yeah.
when I look at work like that, I personally don't always understand the emotion behind it. Is that like an intentional thing that artists sometimes do, or
I can't speak upon all artists, but there's many pieces like the Mona Lisa, which is a great piece, but lots of the prestige behind it is the story behind the Mona Lisa and the mystery behind it itself, less so than the ability of the artist. Um, like lots of abstract work, people always talk about how they could do it themselves. Um, but they didn't do it themselves, and there's a
mm,
story behind why it's so fantastic. My pieces, you could say that anyone could really do it. It looks a bit, for some people, it could look like a big mess, but there's a lot of thought behind it. And I guess you just got to read into it a little bit more and understand it and put some effort into understanding the piece, and I think then you'll come to realize why it's worth some
because whenever I
money.
think about like valuating work, I
Yeah,
always say it's two things you can value it off. One, the artist themselves,
yeah.
the fame they have around them, or two, the story behind the actual piece that's been created. And you've touched on a really important thing there is, I could try and scribble on a page, but I'm not going to get anywhere near that because my intention wasn't the same as what you had, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's also the quality of the medium. Like there's artists which create well, like jewelers, for example, their pieces are art and it's just but it's expensive material and then like really great skill doesn't really need to be a story behind it. Um and then there's like taxidermy artists, which is all it's all really interesting. Lots of them cost lots of money. Um for me, I haven't really looked at my paintings for money yet. They're more for myself
Mm.
and for my expression rather than
Yeah.
money. So I'm not all too sure.
Do you think you can like define a successful artist?
Um, I don't think I could find everyone's successful artist, but for me, if I was to define myself as successful as an artist, it would be for my pieces to allow viewers to feel almost the exact same feeling and that I had whilst I was painting it. So the intention that I painted it for, or first glance, if they were able to feel that, I think that would be a pretty successful artist. I think many people, including other peers and colleagues I know in the art world, have that feeling. Whether you work with nature and you see a beautiful mountain and animals, um, and you feel that awe feeling, and if you're able to recreate that and someone else looks at a painting and also feels that the same awe feeling, I think you've become pretty successful at your job, I
Yeah, so
think.
it's more about a feeling rather than like a benchline that you have to kind of
I
meet.
don't think it's a monetary
Yeah.
fence line you have to reach or anything. It depends on who you are. For your parents, it may be a money thing, but at least for me, it's not a money thing.
So you want to focus more on the emotions that provoked from pieces such as this one.
Yeah, that's my aim. Because I really make paintings for myself, and if someone else also is able to sort of relate to it, I think that's quite a special thing.
Do you think because you make them for yourself, you obviously have an emotional connection to them? When you let them go, for example, do you have any feelings of like relief that maybe that emotional period is starting to disappear or
I do feel sad letting go of my paintings. I always feel a bit sad because they're like your babies. You work on them for a long time, and then you hold them on for a long
yeah?
time, and you have to keep them nice and safe, and so they don't get moldy and whatnot. Um, and they are again, yeah, a part of your life. So telling them is for me always hard. I don't think I really felt a relief from them. Again, I think my bank account probably would feel a relief from them, but I don't really feel a relief from them. But I also do would feel very, very grateful if someone wanted to spend money on something which I've spent a lot of hours in my heart, and they appreciate it and they're happy to spend a certain amount of money on it, then I think that really shows the gratitude and the love for the painting enough for me to let it go.
If there was a piece of advice that someone had given you early on, or even, recently that you've thought about, that you want to give out to some other artists that may be starting out or feel like they're a bit stuck at where they are, what would that be?
I think it would probably be that it takes a long time to find who you are as an artist. And I think who you are as an artist continuously changes. I don't know who I am and I'm still exploring. And I think the idea of sort of the traditional art style, like the landscape portrait, that style, I think that you shouldn't confine yourself to that and you should just explore as much as you can. And even if you don't like what you're doing, just keep exploring and exploring until you find sort of what fits for you. I think I wish I started that journey earlier because I would have been further along on this journey. Um, yeah, I think don't let other people tell you too much what to do, and I think just do what feels right and just keep exploring.
I've always thought, art is subjective, film is subjective. We have Oscars for the films.
Yeah,
Would an Oscar style award system ever work for, paintings and sculptures and that side of the art world?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think it could be quite fun. It's art is quite shishy, and it's quite
Highbrow.
yeah, um, it's quite mysterious, and I feel like it's appreciated so right now by many more few, well, much fewer people than in acting and film. So I think it's hard because you'd have to have people's voting, and I don't think people are so into the art world as they are into the film world. So it'll be interesting how they would do that.
I always think because when you watch a film, you kind of decide whether you think it's a good film or whether you think it's a bad film.
Yeah,
When you look at a piece of art, the first thing that comes to your mind isn't normally, is this a good piece of art or is this a piece of art that I don't like? It's normally, a bunch of emotions, and I've never really personally looked at a piece of art and felt like
yeah.
either wrong or right about it. So I was wondering, like, how would you judge if you were a judge?
So when I go to galleries, I sort of view paintings and artwork as food. Um, so not everyone's likes the same food, and you go in there and um, it's whatever's your taste. If you don't like it, you don't like some people don't like caviar, but it's super high priced and it's sought after. And I really like KFC, and some paintings for some people are like cheap and not very nice, but I really like them. So it's a for me, yeah, I just view paintings as food. You can
Yeah,
like them and you may not like them, and you go past, and yeah, that's how I view them as.
I love this comparison. I've never heard someone compare artworks to food before, but I honestly think it's very enlightening, actually.
Yeah. What would you, what food would you call my piece?
Ooh, I mean, for me, like avocados, creme de la creme. Maybe I don't know. For some reason, when I look at it, I think about an ice cream.
An ice cream.
I don't really know why. I mean, I like ice cream, so that's always a good thing, I guess. But
I always thought it was a bit of a pomegranate person.
oh, I kind of see that. But
Yeah.
I don't like, how you have the seeds and pomegranates. I
Yeah.
find them so annoying.
And the white bits are very
Yeah.
nice. Bit of hassle.
A lot of people in the art industry, when you think of the art industry,
Yeah.
I personally think of older people,
Yeah.
people with more knowledgeable, can tell you the history of every fine art piece within a gallery. Why should people listen to younger generations, and why is the younger generation kind of coming into the art world, putting out pieces that are inspirational, worth looking at?
Well, I think art is kind of, it doesn't really care if you're old or young, the art piece itself. I think everyone's view is important, and so younger generations' view should also be important. Um, and they experience a different form of emotion and experience different things to older people. So I think then it will become a new artwork, and I think that's important. We need continuously new stuff and more development, more progress with our art, or sometimes less progress, sometimes it's better as
Yeah,
well. Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to appreciate each other's voices, and yeah,
it's good because I was talking to my friend in Switzerland, and he didn't know much about art, and he was thinking, art. He was thinking of old people
it
telling
is
him
quite
about
oldie.
history
It's
and
quite fuddy duddy some parts, yeah.
yeah. Definitely. And I want to end with a question that I like to ask most guests is what sort of legacy do you want to leave behind with your artworks?
Um, I think someone that's as original to themselves as possible. Um, Someone that plays around with the idea of polarity. 'Cause that's quite important to me, and someone who deeply cares about their own artwork. Um, yeah, I do really care about my art, and I really hope other people also care about my artwork. And um, yeah, I think originality and sort of caring about your own pieces and the art world. I think that's the most important legacy for me.
It's definitely clear that you're very passionate about this and you really enjoy doing it, and you definitely sound like you're going to carry on creating for time
I
to
hope
come.
so if I have enough money to.
That was really good. You smashed it, mate.